Hello everyone, this is the Reunification tour video of Randall at Budapest Hungary. The meeting was held at Metagame Klub in Budapest, which is usually held in card games and lately delves into tabletop gaming as well. We had one table of Alpha Strike, introducing it some new player and some older player, or let's say player who didn't try it yet, and we had a table with several Solaris games for quick matches. In few photos the same, you can see the Alpha Strike. You can see the Solaris. And we had a little bit of painting contest, which was solo units and unit like 4 or 5 mechs, depending on inner sphere or clan. And which was nice to see that a lot of players brought their units or mechs, and of course that it was a wide representation of factions, so it was not really a multiplying of a specific faction, so it was very good to see, in my opinion. And also Randall and his son really liked the different options by players, and it was a kind of like, let's say, public vote between the attending people to vote for the best looking in both categories, and in the end the winner was getting some applause. And as Randall surprised us with some gift, we randomly give it to people who attended the event. And we had a Q&A with Randall, which was the following.
To the original team who kicked out the whole Battletech still on the field.
Yeah.
The basic settings, the original crew, you knew all the guys who are just icons for us. How would you define what was pictured there? How close are the present Battletech to what was thought out there at that moment?
So it's actually interesting. I think it is both like shockingly close and shockingly different. And what I mean by that is that the I think last year Ash Barker from Gorilla Miniature Games did a video where he compared the second edition rulebook right out of the box to a Game of Armored Combat's rulebook. And as best as he could tell, there was about 3% of the rules that had changed. That's it. And I don't think there is another game in our entire industry that has been in publication and development and change for all of these years, and yet has at its core remained nearly identical. So you can, go and grab a record sheet out of a 1985 box and sit down and play it right now with these rules. That's amazing. At the same time, the fact that that it's 40 years and we're now at the best moment it's ever had. 40 years of development, that 150 years nearly have passed within the universe. All the ups and downs of the story arcs, the computer games, the cartoon, like all the ways that it's grown and expanded. The Alpha Strike, the new plastic mechs. I'm sure a lot of that stuff they could never have imagined. Heck, I can barely imagine it, right? And I've experienced it. And so it's interesting to talk with Jordan. Like, I just was at Jordan's house a couple weeks back, got invited over there, and we got talking obviously about Battletech. And again, it's one of those where we're just kind of in awe of how far Battletech has come and where it's at and why it's still here. And so it's kind of that great both at the same time, where it's really close and yet it's just unbelievably different.
Nem tudom, valakinek szüksége van erre, hogy fordítsam a válaszát, vagy mehetünk a... Jó. So there's no need for translation.
No, okay, perfect.
Okay. So, some pepper in it, some Hungarian flavor. We are in Hungary. There are a lot of Hungarian hints in Battletech, especially the early maps and
planets,
Yeah.
locations.
locations. Yeah.
So even some like officers in specific units.
Yeah. In Empire alone, there was a Hungarian colonel mentioned in a previous link message. So, how do you know it? It was just roll a dice and it will be German, roll a dice it will be Hungarian, or was it intentional?
So
was anyone in the team?
the current team is nearly always very intentional, right? We know that this is a game played around the world, and Battletech is a game, is a universe populated by all of the cultures and peoples of the earth. And so they absolutely go out of their way to make sure that there's representation, and also to like dig deep and find where there's never been representation and pull it out. Now, initially, that goes, even goes back before me, even if I've been doing this for so long. And at that time, that was far more just throwing darts at a board, I'm pretty sure, right?
Yeah.
Because it's 2,000 planets that you're trying to name. Now, they were doing it in Chicago, and Chicago has a huge collection of cultures and races and so on. And so it's funny because I was just in Poznan, the last event, and they had almost this exact same question, pointing out the Polish worlds. And I'm like, well, there's a huge Polish community in Chicago. And so I'm sure they had friends there, they had, and so they're able to just, even if you did that, like for the longest time after I left Chicago, I still had the Chicago phone book, back when there was phone books.
Yeah.
And when I'm writing a novel, or particularly when I had to do like a field manual where you're doing an endless series of lists, and I'm just randomly grabbing names because I knew it would be this great, huge merging of ethnicities. And so some of it may be purposeful, but I really think it was them just, knowing, okay, it can't all be John Smith, but really just grabbing and not really sure what they're grabbing, but just, this sounds like a unique name to throw on a planet. So it's more darts at the board.
Because for me, three like major hints there. One is the Smoke Jaguar G repository was called Mount Sabo, so it was in the Sabo mountain, which is a Hungarian family name. And the other one was that actually it's mentioned earlier in Sara, but I haven't seen this mentioned lately, so I think it's edited out sometime. But it was mentioned that the Mariks were from Austro-Hungarian Empire for originating.
Yeah.
And the third one is that actually right now in the current era, or let's say generally for the Hell's Forces, the main planet is Chestreg, and it's full of Hungarian, like Budapest, past, and like, it's another planet, but it's like, I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So it was very interesting.
Yeah, so, like I said, initially I think it was more
random.
just a dartboard.
Yeah.
But now the current team absolutely wants to represent that.
Yeah.
So, and from the background a bit, how, in nutshell, is a new era, new era kickoff? So, is it intentional planning, or someone had an idea and you work it out?
No, the new plan, the new era was years and years in development.
Yeah.
And it was very intentional. In fact, if you go hunting online, you'll find references to like a 3250 era and a 3500 era. Like we plan lots of different, how are we going to do this? And then also part of it was any property, intellectual property, Star Wars, Star Trek, whatever it is, that lasts a long time, gets really messy. And the Dark Age had gotten really, really messy, right? You can love the Dark Age, you can hate the Dark Age. There's good in the Dark Age, there's bad in the Dark Age. But it had gotten really problematic, just like anything does. And we did not want to pull a Lucas and just draw a line in the sand and throw everything away, right? Like, I hated when they did that. And I know most fans hated that. And we didn't want to do that. And so part of why it took a while was just figuring out how do we wrap it up in a way that isn't too terrible, because it was never going to probably be wrapped up fantastically. It was never going to please everyone because it just got too messy, right?
Yeah.
And so instead it was let's wrap it up the best we can, but then lay a foundation for what will hopefully be an incredibly new, exciting era that people will be excited in.
Yeah.
And most of those, there's still tons of people that don't play Nail Clan at all, right? They play Succession Wars, Clan Era. That's fine, right? Like that to me is one of the strengths of BattleTech, that you can have all these different eras that people love and that they play in. And while we absolutely are going forward into this new era, we're going to be supporting every one of those eras, right? Next year is the Celestial Pack for the Jihad, right? And there's a Wars of Reaving Pack for the Clan Homeworlds, right? We're going to keep supporting those type of things. But most people that I have met, once they give the Ill Clan era a try, they do start to fall in love with it. There's something there for everyone. Particularly the Hinterlands. It's the whole reason, like, there's a whole book on the Hinterlands, is nearly everyone, for those that know nothing about it, and if you've been playing a good long time, it's very much the Chaos March, after the FedCom kind of, Catherine pulled Lao out and pulled the Lyran half out, and it kind of collapsed down in that middle. That's kind of the same thing. When the Jade Falcons go off to Terra and get absolutely obliterated, what happens to that occupation zone? And like suddenly, like, hey, everyone's in, right? And it's so fun to play in. And that, like I said, when I'm actually home and running a local campaign, I have a campaign in the Hinterlands. It's just super fun. So if you've never tried it, give it a try. Just dip your toe in, and I think you'll fall in love and be off and running.
You will be sucked in.
You'll be sucked in. Absolutely.
Yeah. So Ill Clan era just started, especially for us. We wouldn't like to ask too concrete questions about the future, but do you have a hint how long will we stay with Ill Clan era? And
no, we're going to be here a while. We have a lot of cool stories to tell. We're going to be here a while.
Yeah, for sure.
Also not concrete stuff, but how would you picture the future? More little factions like in Dark Age, or fewer but very powerful factions, probably like in Succession Wars? What would you prefer? Personally.
Personally, I was going to say I can't tell you that, or else it'll ruin it. Personally, actually, the thing.
Not Mr. Bills, but Randall.
Yeah, no. I kind of like the smaller, right? I like the monolithic faction with the crazy going along the edges, which again is why I really love the Ill Clan era, because you have the Hinterlands, you've got the border between the Combine and the Fed Sons that's kind of shattered. It makes it so easy for the campaign that you're playing to feel like the universe is coming alive on your table, because it's not all of the Davian Brigade of Guards storming the planet, right? Like in the Fourth Succession Wars, when the Crucis Lancers all went down on Tikhonov, one, that's super awesome, and two, my little unit is worthless, right? Totally irrelevant. Whereas in something like the Hinterlands or along the Davian Creative border or wherever, like down in Merrick, there's lots and lots of messiness. It can feel like my little force of 12 guys matters and can make a difference. And so that's always been the heart of what makes BattleTech, why it sinks its teeth into you and you can't ever let it go, is that the stories unfold on your table and it feels like real and it feels like your force mattered, and so that's what I prefer.
Okay. There are these sidelines in the storyline, which I So the remnants of the Wolverines came in at Minnesota Tribes, one of the best ghost stories
Yep.
in the
Absolutely.
or the Homeworld clan. So will these sidelines handled, or they just away from the main storyline?
Some of them will get stories told about them. Not all of them ever, because then we're back to it's boring,
Yeah.
right? You don't want those stories completely told.
Yeah.
I'm horribly behind on a Novacat novel that I'm supposed to be writing, because I'm sitting here with you
Yeah.
guys, and there's a ton of Novacat and Spirit Cat plot threads that were woven across the last 20 years, right? So big that I'm trying to figure out how I can do it in one novel. But even though I'm going to answer quite a few of those, I don't want to answer
not all.
every last
Yeah.
one, because that's too nice of a bow, right? You always want that, like, but, right? That's what you want out of good storytelling. So some of them maybe will never be answered ever. But a part of that is less us going, haha, we're not going to tell you, but also more like we don't know what the cool story is,
Yes.
right? Like, so I have a lot of people that come to me and will be like, when do we get to see the Clan Homeworlds again? And my response is, well, when we have a cool story.
Yep.
Because, like, if they just invade again, like Yawn Fest, who wants that? We don't want that. You guys don't want that.
Yep.
So then what's the story that's like, oh my gosh, I didn't see that coming, right? Like, when I read Lethal Heritage for the first time, and at the very end, he's like, it's not it's not Wolf Dragoons, it's Wolf Dragoons, and like, I throw the book away, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm running around, I can't believe it,
Yeah,
that's,
remember.
right, those are the moments that we want, and so we need to find what that is, and by the way, that may not be us, that may be one of you guys here.
Yeah.
I say every time, Shrapnel, if you guys want to participate in this universe and you want to write in it, write for it. Go submit to Shrapnel, and it may be one of you in a couple of years that comes up with the idea for the Homeworlds or for the Return of the Word of Blake or whatever it might be that everyone asks about, and we're like, that's boring, I don't want it. But suddenly, if we see a good story, we'll follow the story. Battletech has always been, we'll follow the story. And so that's why often some of that stuff lays on the side, is both because we don't want to answer everything, but also, well, we haven't figured the cool story out yet. And once we do, then we'll absolutely let's do it.
Yeah, following that thread away from the main line, we got Battletech as a skeleton, and now it's filling up with meat. So, for example, from the founding of the clans, we just know that there were two great Kerensky, then a not named clan, which was Wolverine, and then I read that on an exhibition there was a chit chat, and someone came up with the idea that let's feel it. You wrote the Dawn of the Clans trilogy, Alexander. Not Alexander, but the son Andrei Kerensky. That filled up the whole Kerensky family. Randall, I think, wrote the Wolverine story, so that was so should we await such skeletons in the closet filled up?
Again, sometimes it will happen, sometimes it won't. Again, for me, it was being able to pitch the idea that, because always before it was, well, if we write about the founding of the clans, how can you possibly write it from the point of view of Alex or from Nicholas, right? Because you can't.
Yeah. That's right.
And it was only when I'm like, wait a second. Well, what if we do it from Andrew's point of view? And he's the one that carries the story through. And once that idea germinated, we're like, that's going to work, right? And that then opened that up. And so, again, it comes back, Lauren, many, many years ago, and this one I was actually sad that he didn't continue, but there was a series in Battlecore all those years ago on the website. He was doing a young Kerensky series of fiction pieces. I think he published 2 of those. And that was another one, like, how do I write Kerensky? How do I write from Alexander's point of view? And so he's like, well, I write as a young man. That's a way to do it, to not, because part of it is, one with Nicholas, you just, he's kind of psychotic. You couldn't actually do it from his point of view. You would never trust that you're actually reading what is really happening. But also from Alexander, like he's one of the all-time great personalities, and you run the danger of not being able to pull it off, right? Like, we've all read some sequel to a book where they promised this amazing thing, and it ultimately wasn't that good, right? And so those are all pieces that you always have to be thinking about. Now, I still think we won't ever fill in every gap, because it's just the wrong choice. You always want some. But at the same time, gaps are going to be filled in. One, because, we want to do those stories. I, as a fan, want it. But then, once again, we find the story. We're like, hey, now we think we can finally do it right.
Yeah.
So, go to the mini side and the business side from the lore side. We saw the time plan of the new boxes, and your team confirmed many times that there is no new Kickstarter planned, just the new boxes. But come on, I'm a Kapellan, buy no Kapellan boxes.
Well, there will be future Kickstarters. I just don't believe there will ever be a Kickstarter at the scale of what this is, because again, it was glorious. It absolutely vaulted BattleTech up to this just unbelievable level that we're at, and it almost killed it to do it, right? It almost killed us to make this happen. And right now we're still just trying to get these last bits out the door to you guys, and it's still almost killing us. And so Kickstarter is too useful, and it's never about the money. It's always about the marketing, right? And it's about the backers. It's about the community that it's built. So, it sounds silly to say it, particularly from the successful side of something, and there's plenty of smaller companies that would want to punch me for saying it, and me, like 6 years ago, would want to punch me. But like when we shot past 3 million, I stopped looking at the number. What I cared about was the backer count. That's what I wanted. And to see that climb up and go bigger and bigger, right? And so Kickstarter is too useful in building larger communities, building awareness of BattleTech out there. And so we'll continue to have them. We're just never going to do such a monster. And I don't mean monster as in the amount of money we make, just the sheer volume of material that we crammed into this. I don't ever want to do that again.
It's understandable.
Yeah. 500 SKUs. Utter insanity. We had multiple fulfillment houses run screaming from us because they wouldn't touch that amount. So, yeah. Total crazy.
Yeah. So we have this classic BattleTech for star or lens size. Alpha Strike is very good for a company size game, but when we think bigger, that was a Battle Force or something, which was interplanetary and regimental size.
I would like to do larger scale. We have the Battle Force rules, and they work pretty good, but there isn't it was 2 years ago, Black Powder came out with an American Civil War giant box, 700 minis, and they're all tiny. It was glorious. Throw them all on the table, play for a whole Gettysburg battle type of thing. So to be able to throw, do a Battle of Tukid, throw multiple regiments on the table, I would love to see that. Whether we'll actually ever get there, I don't know. But that's certainly a pet project of mine.
But it's not out of...
It absolutely not. I would love to, 4 mechs on a regular base, little mechs, and being able to throw a regiment out for an evening, I would love that.
General heads.
Exactly, right? So that's a personal pet project of mine, so certainly not without I'd love to see that happen the next few years.
Yeah, and any new, not concrete, but hints of a new point of vision, the encounters?
Any similar or kind of other battle.
So we're always looking. It was interesting because one of our other longtime beloved properties, Shadowrun, it's actually so much easier to make board games and card games for that than it is for BattleTech. To capture what it is to do BattleTech is just a lot harder. We still absolutely want to do it. So yeah, we're actually looking at multiple board games, multiple card games. We want to expand in that. My son and I have mostly designed a kind of a spiritual successor to the old Succession Wars game. Will be a giant big box set game. And so we have a lot of cool things in the works. It just, we got to get this thing Kickstarter out the door to break up some free space to be able to actually then work on this other stuff. Yeah, always time. I got to stop being out here with you guys. So
and then I will take a step again closer, not to Mr. Bills but Randall. As a gamer, how do you feel? Grab two aspects of the BattleTech. What you feel the most polished, never touch it because it will ruin, and one that needs tweaking, needs more thinking, but you don't like. It can be good, but not there.
And for the rules, you mean? For the rules. I very rarely don't look at a rule and want to polish it. So like in Total Warfare, we went through and I totally reworked vehicles and infantry like crazy, right? And a lot of that is because they never felt like the fiction, and I wanted to try to make them feel more like the fiction. But even on the mech side, for example, the way that partial cover was done previously was a second step where then you rotated up to a different, the punch hit location table. And so then the change to the new rules was about, well, how do you keep the flavor and just make it a little simpler, a little easier to use? And so I think we've already talked about this, so hopefully Ray doesn't get mad at me. We are working on a new rule book that's coming down the pipeline, where we're doing the exact same thing, where we're looking at BattleTech rules, and we're like, again, this is not a 2.0, this is not even a 5.0. BattleTech is doing gloriously well, right? So then it's just with the little polish bit, what can do a little more? For example, say one of the holy grails that I would have loved to do, and if anyone can figure it out, so the two-hit missile table, the cluster table, the flavor of that is super fantastic. It's super clunky, okay? When it was 4 columns, that's one thing. Even when it was 8 columns, that's one thing. There's like 20 columns on this stinking table. And there's no one in this room, and I feel very confident that has all of those memorized, right? No. Nobody does. And I know these tables better than almost anyone I know, and I don't even have that thing memorized. But then how do you keep the flavor while simplifying? And a ton of time has been spent on it. And so again, it's one of those to me there is no holy grail that can't be smashed if it means that the game actually is a little easier to use, is a little better, still retains the flavor. And so I don't think there's something that I look at. Now actually one example is kind of a new thing. So every time I walk in and see the Battlefield support strike cards being used, I break into a giant smile, because in the Battle Mech manual, one of my goals was how do I let people do minefields and artillery and aerospace strikes with some good flavor without having to go get TAC Ops, And I wrote TAC Ops, and yet that stuff's annoying sometimes, right? And so to walk in, and every place I've been, I've walked in and seen those cards being used, and that just makes me smile, because that means we did it right, right? So that's a thing where we don't have to do. In fact, the only thing we had to do is in the Mercenaries, with the new Battlefield support rules in the Mercenaries box, for the new Battlefield support rules for the vehicles, we wanted all of the points to balance out, and so we needed a wider design space in the amount that the points were generated. So the only thing we had to do with the strike was to increase the amount, But in doing that, we're also then able to play test enough and get all your guys' feedback enough that in the Mercenaries box, it's now all battle valued as well. So you can now play cool asymmetrical games. So I'll play with Bryn, and he might grab a star of 5 mechs, and I might grab 2 mechs, and then some vehicles and some artillery strikes, and it's all balanced out, all the same system. It's awesome.
Yeah, that's back what I wanted to also mention. That's fantastic idea. The artillery and aerospace are complicated.
Yeah, they are.
But nowadays, just one card.
It's just a little buff card. It gets you the flavor. It's and now that it's BV balanced as well, it's even better. So yeah, it's going to be great.
Yeah. And you can balance in with the pilot cards also. So
yeah.
Okay, and we wouldn't be nerds if we were going to ask your favorite era and favorite match.
Favorite era. So favorite era, I actually don't really have one. I'm such an equal opportunity BattleTech player that I love them all. I think they all have strength, they all have weaknesses, and even though I was the 15-year-old boy playing Succession Wars and then experiencing the clan invasion when that happened, and so that has a special place in my heart. At the same time, then I've been able to work with an amazing group of artists and authors and developers for all of these decades to then create these new eras and then to see your guys' experience with those new eras. So I really don't have actually a favorite era. I'm just it's either what do you guys want to play or it's what do I feel like, right? I will say right now, the current flavor is absolutely the Ill Clan because the Hinterlands is just so stupidly fun, and the new variants coming out, the new mechs and stuff, and the rec guides. We're just talking about the Hammerhead. Oh my gosh, the Hammerhead is so much fun to play. So that's less about this is my favorite era and more about it's just fun to play in. It's engaging. For mechs, man, that is
which kid to love?
Exactly. So when everyone asks me this, I really kind of have 2 answers. One is there's a Phoenix Hawk, the 7K, that's 699 with a snub-nosed PPC on it. So, and that short range of 9 hexes. And so I can just knife fight, which is the way I love to play. I mean, don't get me wrong, roll up with a couple of ER PPCs, that's fun. But being able to just endlessly dance around a forest and just snipe at you, I love that style of play. And that's just one of the best mechs there is at it. But for those that are long in the tooth playing BattleTech, back in the 80s and early 90s, there was a magazine called Battle Technology. And what was so cool about this magazine is that it was written as though it was published from within the universe. And so the ads would be ads of things going on in the universe. The guys, it was so immersive that when I read it as a 16-year-old kid, I just lost my mind. It was the coolest thing ever. And in the early 90s, this was after late 90s, after the 4 Succession Wars, one of the things was right into the editor about what your Merc unit was doing when the 4 Succession Wars happened. And so it was the very first time that I'm actually writing a story that I'm going to publish. I'd handwritten stories before, but this was a little story I was actually going to publish. And in the original 3025, there's literally one line about the Banshee 3S prototype that was lost. And so I wrote up that was my Merc unit, and they went and they stole it. And it was glorious because the 3S is the best assault variant of that era, hands down, right? So I wrote it, and I sent it in, and unlike the internet age where even I get tired when Netflix doesn't, go on fast enough, I put it in the mail and forgot about it for a year. And then I'm at a local game convention, and I'm walking around with my buddy, and I pick up an issue, and I'm doing it, and there's my story, and I just stopped dead, and I lost it, right? I couldn't talk, and so that was my first little toe that then led me to sitting here and talking about BattleTech with you guys. And so it's hard for me not to have the Banshee 3S always.
It's understandable.
Yeah, right? And so when we were working on the new Mercenaries materials and that Titanic Aerodyne Light Horse image, And I got to go to Marco and go, you're doing a 3S right there in the center, right? And he's like, sure, you bet. So, because that just to me epitomizes that type of thing. So it's hard for me to not, And then other people will be like, what's the best mech? And usually my response is, well, one, it does, but it's really hard not to just call the Timberwolf one of the best mechs that's ever been made. It's combination of speed and firepower and armor, and it's got a half a dozen configurations that will tear the crap out of you. And it still looks so fantastically menacing all these years later. So yeah. Good runner-up for me.
Thanks for answering our question.
Of course. Is that it?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You are most welcome. I love these. I love sitting down and answering questions. Yeah, absolutely.
Also, just a little going back to
No, he said he was done.
No, it's not question. It's just my theory. So after I read Dominion Divided, and after I read the Empire Alone, it's kind of feels like for me that Real Clan Era is like destroying each major power's armies to a very smaller level. And for me, it seems like that is going to be like a sandbox for each faction on equal level, and going to have, I wouldn't say a fifth succession war, but I feel like it's going to be like an all-scale-out war again, but in minor level.
It is. We are designing the Ill Clan era not to be quite as insane as the Hinterlands everywhere, but absolutely to be a little smaller, right? Because there is, as I was just saying, when all 9 Crucis Lancers RTCs lands on Tikhonov, my little mercenary unit is irrelevant. And we want it. We want the game.
Yeah,
BattleTech is best when the story comes alive on your table, and when it feels like you can mesh it in between the fiction that you're reading. It's what I did when I was playing, right? Just like I said, I found that one line, wrote a whole little story. We did a whole campaign with that, and that felt like my contribution. Like I was striding into BattleTech, and so BattleTech is best when the story accentuates the play. And so absolutely we're doing that. And in some instances, like the Ghost Bears, they could have just owned the entire inner sphere. So we had to, they had to get taken down a couple of pegs because they were just monstrously powerful.
Yeah, but we have Leo now who's still strong, because if I remember correctly, they are the only ones who haven't lost much of their army.
Yeah. No, there's still some.
So probably maybe in the
there's still some.
Well,
I was just saying, Raven Alliance, man, finally getting some good.
My boys.
They're getting some good stage time in Ilkhan's eyes.
They are ones I'm expecting to have some interesting storyline, hopefully.
Yep.
But the other one for me is the Diamond Sharks and now Sea Foxes. And that source books we can see that they have hints for the HPG network to be running up against. So I expect some, like doing something in the background with that.
There's awesome machinations.
And also
that's another one. So I will always be a die-hard Combine player. That's what I started out with. But I came to love the Nova Cats and the Sea Fox because I got to play with them so much. And so it's kind of, speaking of those moments where you're never sure what's going to happen, right? Like, so we're working on the Dark Age setting all those years ago with Jordan when he was doing his click base. And, what are we going to do with the Diamond Sharks? Well, let's try something different. And so then I wrote my novel, really like just kind of crafting a whole new, cool, weird thing. And I never imagined that 20 years later it'd be such a beloved faction and be so important and be having so much fun with them. And so like the whole Empire, the opening fiction in Empire Alone was gloriously fun to write because it just was like, there's all these little tidbits of what's coming and hints at it.
Also
so much fun.
Like very different as a fleet, because Fina is more like focused in the Freeverse League with Clan Protectorate and doing whatever they are doing. And also I started to love the Fox Canate after reading Dominion Divided because they were so badass with the mercenaries contract. And like going there like, we signed this contract, but you don't want to pay me or give me what's written. Like, let me look at that. Are you sure you don't want to do that? No, trinary now. It was so badass.
So much fun.
it was fun because they kicked up the rules of BattleTech. You need to hold a planet, planet to planet. They made a wandering feast, so these shenanigans were unimaginable before that. So
yeah, it was a lot of fun.
It's crazy.
Well, any final questions from the gallery? Anything we didn't cover? That was a good that was a good long session.
I have one question.
Yeah.
We are a few weeks away from MV5 plans. Did you have?
I have seen parts of it. Prana did a good job at like showing it to us. So it's not like in MechWarrior 5, like I was working right along with them, lore consultant, doing all that, writing all the fiction that got published for it. This time it was much more on them, but they did a very nice job, and every couple of weeks would be like, hey, can you look at this? We've got this question. They were trying really hard to keep the lore. I'm trying not to like, the fanboy in me cannot wait, which is, somebody told me, I think it was you, told me that it had been delayed 2 weeks, which is awesome because it means I should be home and can be sitting there refreshing on Steam until it drops and then I get to play, right?
Yeah.
But the business person in me, we have not had a breakout MechWarrior game in like 25 years.
Yeah.
And it feels like this is right on the verge of having that possibility. And when BattleTech as a whole is bigger than it's ever been, there's more interest, there's more, everywhere you go on the internet, there's some new Instagram post of somebody sharing I'm painting a mech, or I'm sharing some new lore video, right? Like, the timing is perfect, and if they can just land this game, and I think there's a chance they could, it could just blow up to a whole other monster level, which we would all just love. So fingers crossed they pull it off.
For the blowing up part, I just got the kind of flashback that it sometimes like sparking question on Reddit, for example, that what if there is a film or TV show? And to be honest, my opinion is that lately, a lot of show is getting cancelled because of not enough viewers and so on. I believe I would love to see that, but I believe it wouldn't be that interesting for the most people generally to see BattleTech on that scale. So maybe animated series could be a good way to test for it. Maybe I don't know.
So the problem with media for BattleTech is that the license was sliced up many years ago.
Yeah.
And so I don't know this for certain, but I've talked with a lot of people, and I feel pretty confident that this is the problem. The problem is twofold. One, Hollywood wants to sign one contract, and then they want to be able to do whatever they want with it.
Yeah.
Right? And for BattleTech, you'd have to sign multiple contracts, and then the chance you can do whatever you want is not as good as it used to be. That is a total turnoff. And so that's why Hollywood has not come knocking. Now, on the reverse side is the company that actually holds the media rights for BattleTech, a company called Tornante. Okay, almost no one's heard of it.
I know Tops and Microsoft.
So Tops, Tops got purchased by Fanatics. Okay, which is, for those that don't know, it's literally $1 billion sports apparel company, and they bought it just to get access to top sports cards. And I swear we were just a line item on the 100th page of the contract that they didn't even know we were there, right? But there's then kind of a separate company sitting out here on the side that is Eisner Group's company called Tornante that holds the media rights. And my personal opinion is they're stuck in an old mindset of they're waiting for Hollywood to show up to give them a giant bucket load of money. Whereas, I've personally talked to I don't know how many Netflix executives that are dying to do a BattleTech or Shadowrun show. And so it's just complicated, and we have no ability. I'll talk to the Netflix executives, we'll have a great conversation, that's awesome, and I'll hand them up the chain, and it's like a giant black void, and nothing happens. So until that changes, unfortunately, we will never get anything. And part of me is sad, but then part of me is happy because I look at some of the latest Marvel shows, and I'm I'm just fine not having that. Or most Star Wars shows, right? So it's you know, I can get it, but it might be terrible. So it's always it's always a double-edged sword on that part.
Perfectly, yeah.
So I think there was a question back here.
Going back to the computer games.
Yeah.
Is there any plan to renovate the old games like Commander?
So we don't have any access to that, right? That's all Microsoft. I'm not aware of anyone doing that, but it's a cyclical thing, right? Like there was 15 years where about 10 years where almost nothing happened, and then MechWarrior Online came along, and then there was another almost 10 years that nothing happened, and then Harebrained Schemes came along with BattleTech, which was such a good game, gloriously good, right? And now they're off doing other things, and so in a couple of years, I absolutely think that the BattleTech universe is too engaging. It gets under your skin, and even when you go play somewhere else for a while, you get drawn back in. So I think they'll come back around to it in a couple of years.
Nice. Yeah.
Any other last questions? I think I'm starting to lose my voice, but this has been glorious. I've loved it. This is so awesome. No? We all good?
Okay. Then thank you very much.
I think we're good. Awesome. Thank you, gentlemen.
The winner for the solo was the Warcrow, and for the unit was the Lirangard. The drawing for the rest of the gifts was randomly selected with an app, but I think the biggest snatch for everyone was the badge from Randall and the mandatory group photo. Thank you everyone for coming, and thank you for Randall for visiting us, and hope to see you next time.